Our speaker today is somebody whom you all know. It is Jason Wilmot. We're looking forward to hearing from him today about his journey of change.
Yes, thank you very much, Elizabeth. That's a great intro, and I'm honored to be able to speak to you today and share my opinions based on personal experiences. Simple definition of change: to make someone or something different. Seems simple enough. You hear the word change thrown around a lot. It could be in your personal life, it could be in the workplace. But how can change happen when most people think of change as something more like this? So when people see the word or hear the word change, there's maybe a little bit of anxiety. There's maybe a little bit of why things are going well the way they are. I don't want to change. Another reaction, which I've seen, and I'm sure you have too, is more like this of, no, I don't want to. That's not what I want to do. But what if everyone looked at change more like this and was excited about the opportunity and felt that they had a part in this change? I think if that were the case, if you felt like you were a part of the change and you were wanting to lead the change, you'd be a lot more excited about it. And in this talk, I'm going to break down three characteristics of change that I have experienced in my personal life that have helped me make adjustments and adapt to the times. I hope that these stories will inspire you to make a change that you've been wanting to do. Maybe you've been putting it off. Maybe you just haven't found the right time to do it. I hope this enables you to make that change starting today. First part of what I'm going to talk about is what I am calling a voluntary change. And I'm just looking at this as the change that you're making on your own. This is something that you want to do, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in your personal life. This is going to be a personal life change for me, not a workplace change in this first part. But again, this is something that I wanted to do, and I know I needed to make a change in order to make it happen. Getting in the time machine that I don't actually own, but if I did have one, I'm taking you back to 2015, where I decided that I wanted to attempt my first triathlon. If you're not familiar with the sport of triathlon, it consists of three disciplines: swim, bike, and run, for different distances depending on how far the actual race is going. Swimming, no problem. I've got that down. I swam through college. I felt really good about my swimming, although I hadn't swum in a very long time. I know I could pick it back up. My hesitation was most triathlons are open water swims, not pool swims, but nonetheless, I felt I could pick that up no problem. Riding a bike, the old saying goes, it's like riding a bike. If you've done it before, you can pick that back up. And again, I felt like riding the bike is going to be no problem. I can get that done with training. Unfortunately, when it comes to running, this was how I felt about running. Very sad. It's not that I didn't think I could run, I just didn't enjoy it. I didn't want to do it. At that point, I could barely run, 1 mile, which is the equivalent of 1.6 kilometers. So how am I going to get to this goal of doing a triathlon if I can just do 2 out of the 3 disciplines? There's no race where you actually get to sign up for a triathlon and do 2/3 and call it good. That's not the way that the actual sport or the race works. So I had to figure out what I was going to do in my own mind in order to make this change, because this was something that I really wanted to accomplish. If I wouldn't have pushed forward and I would have just continued to do my own thing, no one would have known any different. I didn't make this a goal that I was letting people know about. I wasn't telling a lot of people about this. This was going to be my personal change. So I could have easily just given up. No one would have known any difference, and I could have just moved on. This is something that I've said for many, many years. And it's that change is really only change for a few weeks, and then change becomes the norm. And you can apply that to the workplace, of course. You can apply it to your personal life. But if you think about it, if you get into a routine, even though you've changed it from the week before, if you keep that same routine, the change becomes more of a norm by the next week. And by the next week, it's definitely more of a norm. And by the third week, it's almost like you don't remember what you were doing before, because this new change is something that is incorporated into your life and you're able to repeat it. So sure enough, after a month of running what I felt was slow and slightly longer runs, I was able to move from 1 mile to 2 miles consistently. And then I moved from 2 miles to 3 miles consistently, and then from 3 to 4. And then before you knew it, I was actually running half marathons and I was finishing half marathon races. And I took that even further and actually have ended up doing 2 full marathons, 26.2 miles on the American conversion, 42.2K for all of you that don't use miles. So this was very inspiring for me. And so not only did I end up doing my first triathlon, since the time I decided to make this change and this personal goal, I've done not 1, not 2, not 3, 4, 5, 6. I've actually done Ironman, half Ironman Arizona twice. So I've done 7 half Ironmans at this point, 2 full marathons, and over 10 half marathons from a guy that literally could not run a mile when I decided to take this on. So I know some of you are probably thinking, yeah, but weren't you already athletically talented? You already mentioned that you were a college swimmer. And that's true. Yes, I do have some athletic talent, that's for sure. But I think everyone joining us on this webinar and in your workplace has talent. You wouldn't be in the roles that you're in if you weren't talented at what you do. So yes, it may be a physical change that I'm talking about, but this also works as a mental change and something that can be in the workplace. The next section is what I'm going to call unexpected change. So I'm going to look at this section as a change that was not on your life map as you would. The first section was, this is not something that is a change that was anticipated. Some of you might know what this is. This is an x-ray. I will tell you that that is my right shoulder. And you can see that the shoulder is fine inside the socket, but if you look at the 2 bones above it, those are actually supposed to be connected by tendons. And you can see that those are no longer connected by tendons and they stick up like this. So I had to regroup and I had to change to what I first thought was plan B, which then turned to plan C, which I actually ended up getting all the way to like plan Z, because I had no idea how to, initially tackle this significant change right off the bat. So I took some breaths. I figured out, once I got my arm out of a sling in the first month, I was able to do a little bit of jogging. I couldn't swim. I wasn't able to get on the bike, but I figured now is the time to do something again and do something different. The plans have changed, but the goals are still the same. So less than 2 months after the injury, I went out and I finished a half marathon up by Yosemite. And at that point, I felt like this is what I needed to do. I've made the adjustment to this unexpected change. And less than 7 months after I fell, I was able to be back and finish and complete a full half Ironman. And then I was able to do another one just a couple months later. So although this talk is about my personal journeys, and again, I want to say that, again, that this is my personal opinion on things that work for me, I would definitely be remiss to not speak about all the change and happening in the world today. Coronavirus, Black Lives Matter, and protests for equality, not only in the United States, but globally. And if I would have told you back in October or November that all of this was going to change, would you have thought anything great was going to come of this? Or would you have thought there's just no way to move forward and just become overwhelmed with all the possible changes? These are just limited positive changes from COVID. I'm not saying that the pandemic is a positive thing. But what I want to say is that there are good changes that have come out of this. What can possibly come good from protesting, right? You hear that from different narratives throughout different platforms. Well, Minneapolis banned the use of chokeholds by its officers. States across the country, across the globe, if you will, are looking to reform police departments. Real conversations of how to change are happening today. So the last section is workplace change. So if you have a hard time changing on your own, as we've been discussing, it most likely will not be any easier in your work life. It requires commitment in order to do it. In the United States, there's a saying about the good old days. So a lot of people say, oh, I wish we were back in the good old days, when whatever change is about to happen is something that they don't want to do. And they wish they were way back in the good old days for when things were better, when things were different. What I say is that mark down today, June 10th of 2020, that in a handful of years, this is going to be the good old days. People forget the trials and tribulations of years past. They mostly remember what happened in the good old days and forget that the good old days still had plenty of change that they had to adapt to inside of the workplace. There's no doubt change is coming. It may be not coming specifically today in your workplace or in your current job. It may not be tomorrow, but at some point, in order to adapt and grow, you're going to have to make some adjustments, and you're going to have to make a change in order to keep succeeding. The question that everyone always asks, what if it doesn't work? Well, remember, change is a journey. It's not always going to work the first time. If something doesn't work, don't consider that a failure. I think that's another place where you can just reframe a bit. It's not a failure, it's a chance and an opportunity to learn to do something new and use that knowledge that you just learned in order to continue to push forward for that change. Replace failure with opportunity, and you've reframed it just enough to understand that that's not going to be the worst thing that ever happens. Another reason it could fail, you're just way ahead of the curve. You may have an idea that's so far ahead of where the company can be at this point, or where the company wants to be at this point, or where the rest of the world can even be. And that's okay. It's okay to be ahead of the curve. It's a good idea, and it always has a chance to resurface, and you'll be right there in order to ride that wave. And of course, always remember that change is only change for a few weeks, and then change becomes the norm.
Thank you, Jason. You're inspiring us all to think about change in a variety of ways.